Today we're going to be troubleshooting a computer, but this troubleshooting is going to come with a story. So hit pause, go pop some popcorn, and come back here when you're ready. Hey everybody, it's Chris and Family Geekery, and today we are going to be troubleshooting a computer, but like I said in the intro, we are going to be telling a story at the same time. So let's start off with this guy. So I'm browsing through Facebook Marketplace, and I see this, and it's got a decent price, so I click on it, and yeah, it looks like a good deal. So anytime I see a computer part listed on Facebook Marketplace, I usually click on the seller's name and see what else they're selling, just in case they're selling other computer parts. And then, lo and behold, I see this, and this, and this, and at that point, it starts telling a story, doesn't it? So either someone has upgraded several parts of their computer, or someone is stripping out a computer and getting rid of some parts and selling them piece by piece. So I went back and looked at the description of this, and the only thing it said, and it said the same thing on all the parts, was, my PSU burned up, I'm selling the parts out of my computer. So yeah, so that started to make sense, right? Someone's computer blows up, they just start selling the parts out of it. Makes perfect sense. Maybe they got a new one, maybe they're fixing it, who knows. But anyways, I contacted the seller and I said, hey, I'll go ahead and take all those parts. And it turned out that she lived basically right around the corner. We're basically neighbors. So it was an easy drive. I said, hey, can I swing by and pick these up? She said, sure, no problem. So jump in the car, drive over, gonna go pick up some parts. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if the PSU is bad and this is all she's selling, where is the rest of it, right? There's got to be a case, a motherboard, and a CPU probably. Even if the PSU is bad, there's more parts. And I looked in her seller profile and I could see all the things that she's sold, recently, and there was no case or motherboard or processor. So when I pulled up, she had the parts there waiting for me, and I said, "Hey, your PSU burned up?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "I'm playing PlayStation now, so I don't need it." And I offered real quick, "Hey, I fix computers. If it's something that you want to put back together, then let me know. I won't buy the stuff. I can just fix your computer for you." And she said, "No, the PlayStation's working great for me." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, what happened to the rest of the parts? Did you sell them?" And she said, "No, I got them in the house. I didn't know what to do with them because I don't know what's good or what's bad." So now that I know that there's other parts, I offered, "Hey, if you want to take a picture of them, if you don't have time right now, if you want to take a picture of them later, send them to me. I'm right around the corner. If it's something I'm interested in, I'll be happy to take it off your hands for you." And she said, "Well, I'll just go right in the house and grab it right now." So I said, "Sure, if you got the time, no problem." So I'm waiting out in the driveway. She goes inside to get the parts, and out comes a dude out of the house, and it turns out it's a guy that works in the same building as me. So we start talking, and he starts talking about how, the computer blew up, and he tried to, look at what he could think might be wrong with it, and they tried a couple things, and they decided just to start, selling the parts. So, small world, right? I had no clue that this was somebody that I knew. So anyways, she comes out with a computer, and I'll show you that in just a second. And now I'm thinking, well, I don't want to just lowball her or, offer money or something. So I said, hey, how about this? How about I take the tower home? I'll buy this stuff here. I'll take the tower home, and I'll figure out what's good and what's bad in it. And if you want to fix it, then, hey, I'll fix it for you, no problem. But if you still want to sell it, then I'll tell you what the parts that are good in there are worth. And, they were willing to just give it to me. They said we were probably just going to donate it anyways. I said, no, really, I'll just, I'll throw you some money depending on what's good and what's bad and what it's worth. So I thought that was a pretty neat story, and hopefully this is going to be a learning opportunity also. I'll show you guys how to troubleshoot. We're going to tear this thing apart and see what's good and what's bad. So I'll show you right here what I bought, and you can obviously see this is a 1 terabyte Western Digital 3.5-inch SATA drive, and it's still mounted on the drive bay thing from the computer. We've got a 128 gigabyte SSD, 2.5-inch SSD, which is Neo Forza, which is a brand that I recognize. another Neo Forza, which is a 8 gigabyte stick, 2666 megahertz. And then this is a GTX 1650. Now, I saw all this stuff in pictures beforehand, so I knew what I was getting into. I know that the brand, I've used Neo Forza many times before. It is a budget brand, so you start to paint a picture in your mind of what the rest of the computer may be. So maybe it was a pre-built, maybe it was something that they just built from parts at Micro Center or Amazon or something. Like I said, inexpensive parts, but I've used a ton of these sticks. They are, cheaply made compared to, what you might be used to from like Crucial, but I've had very little problems with them. Same thing with this guy here. It's not going to be a Samsung, but it's going to work. And then even the Gigabyte here, good brand for GPUs, but if you look at how it's manufactured, this is manufactured on the cheap side of things. So if you look at a comparable GPU like this guy here, this is a RX 5500, you got the nice back plate. It just looks, the casing goes all the way to the edge. And this one is basically just one huge heat sink with a couple of fans on it. Nothing fancy. But like I said, at 1650, it's gonna do its job. It doesn't have to be pretty. And then the thing about the big disk drives here, there's not too many people that still make them, so it's really hard to find a bad company, right? You got Western Digital and Seagate and a couple other brands that make these, so you're not going to find a Neo Forza 3.5-inch disk drive. So Western Digital Blue, that's a decent drive. Whether or not I put it back into a computer, I don't know yet, but I picked it all up anyways. So these are the parts that I'm starting with that I'm assuming are good, and let me show you now the rest of the computer. So here is the tower, and I took the glass door off just to cut down on the reflection. But let's take a look at what we got and what's possibly in there. So we know all the parts that were taken out, and let me just say I wasn't surprised to see the name iBuyPower on this case. iBuyPower, if you don't know, is a pre-built gaming computer company that makes a lot of computers for retail sales, like in a Best Buy or something. And what they do is they put together a bunch of inexpensive parts and make a decent spec computer out of it, and then they make it pretty, and they sell it for a decent price. So it's hard to make a lot of money building and selling computers, especially at retail. So much competition, very little overhead, very little profit. So they have to cut corners here and there. So we saw some of the corners, right? Neo Forza RAM, Neo Forza SSD, and a cheaper built GPU at least. So let's see what else is in here. I haven't looked up any parts numbers or anything. Let's see what we got inside. So here's the parts inside that are left. We got a power supply below. We'll look at that once we pull this thing apart. But we've got, if you can't see it here, it's an H310. You can't see it at your angle, I'm sorry. But H310 motherboard, which is like a 8th, 9th gen Intel. So underneath this fan here, I'm going to guess is either an i3-9100F, or if you're real lucky, it's an i5-9400F. Both of those are the cheaper variants of i3 and i5 that don't include video because they know there's going to be a video card in here for gaming. So that's what I'm going to guess is underneath there, probably a 9th gen i3 or i5. Very small motherboard, a micro ATX, of course. We got a little Wi-Fi card in here, 2 RAM slots. So these H310 boards are the cheaper versions that Intel always has. Several levels of chipset for their Intel series, and H310 is the cheapest chipset. So it's not surprising to see 2 RAM slots instead of 4. And but the rest of it's pretty standard. We got some SATA connectors on here, the USB 3. Still got the power supply hooked up. So what I'm planning on doing is taking this completely out, slapping it on the bench, getting a known good power supply to it, and put enough components together to boot it up and see if the motherboard and processor and RAM are still good, and then we can go from there. So taking a look at the rest of it, from what you can see right here, here's the back plate. the I/O backplate, and you can see it's missing a bunch of stuff, right? And again, this is another way that these companies, so this company here will contact whoever it is that made that motherboard and say, hey, we just need some cheap motherboards. Can you keep a couple parts off of it and sell them to us for cheap? And that's what they do. So you got a DVI output here, which you're not going to need, of course, if you've got a graphics card. But you would generally, on a modern, this is, just a couple of years old, on a modern computer have an HDMI output, which this is completely lacking. But like I said, we're not going to need that because we're going to have a graphics card in here. But it's just funny to see that. No Wi-Fi built on the motherboard. That's why we've got the Wi-Fi card in the back, which is fine. But look at the power supply. Let me pull this up here. If this is the original power supply, then iBuyPower should be ashamed of themselves. I haven't seen a silver-colored power supply in many years. Now, these used to be the standard, of course, but almost every power supply these days is black. So I'll be interested to see what name brand this is, if it's even a name brand that we pull out of here, what the specs are on it, and see if it's actually good or bad. It may be good. There may be something different that's wrong with this. But other than that, the rest of the case is pretty nice. You got 3 RGB fans, 2 in the front, 1 in the back. That leads me to believe there's some kind of a RGB controller back behind here to at least turn these on. There is a button on top now that I'm looking for LED. So this will likely cycle through different color combinations, and so there's probably either built onto the front or the top, or mounted in the back, some kind of a controller that allows that button to control the lights of these fans. And here's the front of the case. I think this is tempered glass. It feels like tempered glass or plastic. I'm guessing it's tempered glass maybe. With, again, those fans behind it. So there is a channel up here to allow air to come in. So if you've got this thing completely solid, those fans won't do anything if they can't pull air into the computer. So they leave some gaps here in the case to allow the air to come down this way. And there is a screen back there to keep the dust from coming into the computer as the fans are sucking the air in. So it's a nice looking case, actually. I haven't powered it up yet, of course, but the design of it I like. It's got a full basement to hide all your wires and stuff, and it's just nice. So that being said, I think the next step to do is we're going to pull this motherboard out and get it on the bench. Alright, so we do have an option, of course, of disconnecting the power supply and getting a known good power supply and hooking up while it's still in the case. And then we'd have to power a couple other things up with it. And although that's an option that I've used before, in this case, I'd rather just disconnect all the cables from the motherboard and pull it out completely. That way, I know nothing else is affecting it. So that's what we're going to do. I got all the cables disconnected. I'm going to pop the screws out. And next time you see me, I'll have this thing on the bench. Alright, so here it is. And it's a tiny little thing, isn't it? So this is an ASRock, like I said, H310. And here's what I was talking about before. You can actually see the solder pads here of where these 2 ports would have been. And there's actually another one over here. So, and they're even labeled. So this one says HDMI. This one's labeled DisplayPort. And this one isn't labeled back here, but it's 15 pins. So I'm betting that was a VGA that would have come up and over the top of the DVI connector. Now, you don't need 4 different video connectors on a motherboard, but it's interesting to see that they're designed to have all those ports there, but they're just left off. And they probably save, 10 cents a piece on all the connectors that they do. And if they sell 1 million units, then that's definitely a savings to them. So you can see some other places where, like I said, they save some money. 2 RAM slots, not much expandability. These PCI slots, we had the one that was taken up by the Wi-Fi card. This is going to be taken up by your GPU, and then there's nothing else left. So no place to add any other cards on if you needed to. But it is what it is. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hook this up with a known good power supply. I've got this power supply here with these beautiful ketchup and mustard colored cables that I've had for years, and I trust it, and I've probably built and troubleshot hundreds of computers with it. So we're going to use that. We're going to hook that up to the two power inputs. We're going to take this guy here, my little MSI GPU, that again, if you've watched the channel before, if you watch any of my other computer builds, you've seen this guy over and over again. We're going to pop him in so we've got a known good video output, and then that should be enough to get us powered up, and then we're going to throw a monitor on and see if we can get at least the motherboard and CPU to post. Alright, so I got everything wired up. I got the power supply hooked up to both the main connector and the CPU connector. I got my GPU plugged in here, and I've taken the motherboard, put it on a static bag, put a couple of these Rubbermaid lids underneath it to stand it up off the desk a little bit, so that this tab, like if you look at the tabs on a GPU that go into the case itself, it gives them some clearance so it's not banging into the thing, because this isn't going to be screwed down to anything. So that's just a little hack that I use when I'm plugging in a GPU. Got mouse and keyboard in here, of course got the video hooked up, and I've got this little power button thing here hooked up. Since we don't have a power button, we got it hooked up right here to the front panel connector for the power button. That way you don't have to, I'll usually just use a screwdriver and short those two pins out, but in this case it's right next to this other header here for a speaker, and I just don't want to try that. So I've got that hooked up to make it easy to just push this button. So I'm going to turn on the power supply over here, hit this button, and I don't care what comes up on the screen. Now, first thing I want to do is see a fan spin, because I've got a fan on the power supply over here, which you can't see. That fan should turn on, this fan should turn on, and then if we get something up on the screen, that's just bonus. So let's flip the switch on this power supply, grab our handy power button, and 3, 2, 1. Uh-oh. So, like I said, all we want to do is see these fans spinning, and I don't have any fans spinning. So that's not good. So let me recheck all my connections real quick, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I've rechecked all the wiring, made sure that this was on the right pin header, and everything's right. I did unplug this and test it. I've got this little dummy right here that you can plug in an ATX power supply to, and it doesn't give any readouts about if it's good or bad. It just makes the thing power up. So I did confirm that the power supply does power up. So it's definitely at this point something wrong with the probably the motherboard. So if the RAM was bad or missing, this thing would still spin up. If the GPU was bad or missing, this thing would still spin up. Nothing good may happen on the screen, but it would at least power up the motherboard itself. So that leads me to believe that something's wrong with the power supply or the motherboard. So the power supply may be good. Who knows? I'll test that out later. So the GPU or the CPU may be good or may be bad. Whatever fried this thing may have fried it also. So what I'm going to do now is look around the shop here, see if I've got another 9th gen board, Intel board, that I can maybe put this CPU in and see if we can fire it up that way. Alright, well luckily I just picked up a bunch of parts from a local guy here who had a GPU farm. He was mining Ethereum with him, and this was one of the boards that he had. And this is a Z390 board, which is an 8th and 9th gen Intel. It's the one of the top of the line chipsets for that particular thing. So we'll probably not use this in the long run, because this is a full ATX board, so this won't fit in that case anyways. But it will give us a chance to throw the chip in there, the RAM, and some other parts, and see what's good out of the parts that we picked up. So this thing's dirty as heck, but I'm just gonna, this thing was already taken off, so I'm just gonna take this old chip out. I think it just had like a little Celeron in there or something, and I'll take the CPU out of the motherboard that we have just to see if that's good. We'll pop it in here, put the cooler back down, and then see if we can get this thing to post with that other CPU. Alright, so sure enough, I took the CPU out of the other motherboard, and it is an i3-9100F. That's what I was thinking. So I got the other parts put in and put the test GPU in. I got the RAM from the system we picked up today. Got the power supply hooked up, mouse and keyboard plugged in. So I'm going to go ahead and take this cooler here, and don't tell anybody, but I'm just going to take this how it is and mount it down on there. And trust me, we're not going to be running this thing very long, so I'm not going to worry about putting some new thermal paste on there for just a couple seconds, because I just want to boot it up and see if we can get it to post and get into BIOS and check out all these components. Alright, so take two. I've got everything hooked up, got the fan down on there, got my power button hooked up. Let's flip the switch on this power supply and smash this button. Look at that, we got fans. So even when I turned the power supply on, you probably saw the lights on the motherboard light up. That means it was getting power. And then once I hit the power button, then it went ahead and turned on the system. Let's see if anything shows up on the monitor. And look at that. It took a little bit, probably because it has new RAM in it, but it's actually booting up into BIOS. New CPU installed. Please run setup. So let's press F1. And here we are. So we got Intel Core i3-9100F, 8 gigs of RAM, and so yeah, everything looks good. So the CPU is fine. It's probably just that motherboard was bad. So let me go ahead and take the GPU and we'll hook that up. Alright, so I got the GPU, that 1650 GPU plugged in now, and let's go ahead and fire it up just to make sure that it's working. And this GPU doesn't require any external power, so it's nice. You don't have to worry about that. It's not the strongest GPU in the world, but it's kind of the go-to right now for budget, modern budget gaming builds. So the speed that it's taken for this to boot and at least get up to the BIOS screen here leads me to believe that there's probably something in the BIOS that needs to be cleared out. This thing, like I said, it was used for mining, and they may have had some weird settings going on in the BIOS to do that. So I'll clear those out later. Also, you can see here on the M.2 slots, both this one and the one that you can't see that's down here, they both have a PCI riser on them. Likely they were using riser boards for GPUs to allow you to plug in a bunch of GPUs into this one board. So that's interesting. So it made it all the way through the boot up sequence here and didn't find a drive. Of course, we don't have a drive plugged in, so it wants us to plug in the right drive. I'm just going to reboot it and try to catch it at the BIOS screen. And there we go. I'll hit the F2. And there we are. So it looks like everything's working as far as the GPU goes. So let's see if we can find the defaults here and load optimized defaults. I'll say yes on that, and then we'll hit save and exit. So I'm not sure. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that was changed. So this may help the boot up speed. Let's see if it boots up any faster going into BIOS again. And that is a little bit faster. So that's good. So now that I know that the CPU is good, the GPU is good, the memory is good, then really I'm not too worried about that power supply, because even if it is good, I'll probably never use it. I'm still interested in seeing what's inside there. But the case is good. So we got several parts. Now I'm not going to use this motherboard long term, like I said, because it's not the right size. If I want to build everything back up into that same case, this is a full-size ATX board. I'm going to need to find an ATX micro. So that's the next step, is finding a micro ATX 9th gen or 8th gen motherboard, and then who knows, maybe we'll build this thing back together. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this troubleshooting video. Hope you guys enjoyed following me along on this little journey of troubleshooting and finding out what parts are good, what parts are bad. Hopefully it helps you somewhere down the road if you ever have this kind of problem. If it does give you help, I appreciate a thumbs up on this video. And if you want to see more stuff like this, or if you want to see me build this back into that case and maybe make a little budget gaming computer out of it, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button too. But thanks as always for watching, and until next time, peace out and geek out.